So I just would like to do a quick introduction for our panel members here. Right here on my right is Bob Fawson. Bob is currently the Executive Vice President of Product Development at Research Now SSI, where he's responsible for building and managing the company's portfolio of digital measurement and insights product. His executive experience with the company has spanned 2 mergers, many acquisitions, and significant business growth. As a recognized expert in digital measurement, Bob is a frequent speaker at Insights industry events. He earned a master's degree in political science and a master's degree in applied economics from Utah State. Beth Colosimo is the executive director at Salt Lake Community College for all things small business. She directs Goldman Sachs' 10,000 small businesses, the Business Resource Centers in Sandy and Park City, the Business Incubator, the Global Business Center, as well as the Small Business Development Center, and the Refugee Leadership Youth and Adult Programs. Is there anything else that?
Yeah.
Okay. She was saying last night that she manages 8 or 9 different organizations at Salt Lake Community, so I think I only counted 7 there, so I wanted to double check there. So.
There's a few more, but that's okay.
Okay. So her divisions provide training and education and access to resources for entrepreneurs, startups, small businesses to help them overcome obstacles and to grow their enterprises. Beth also founded and owned and operated Wasatch Home Furnishings and Draper. As an entrepreneur, she understands the challenges of owning, operating a small business and enjoys working with entrepreneurs at all stages of business development. Beth's diverse professional background includes an extensive sales career in corporate America, small business ownership, and business development for nonprofit organizations. Beth also serves on numerous boards, including Sandy Area Chamber of Commerce, the World Trade Center, Utah, Salt Lake County Revolving Loan Fund, MEP, SCORE, and District Export Council. Beth has a BS degree in communications, broadcast journalism from the University of Utah, and an MBA in marketing from Westminster College. And then here on the right is Tim Barney. Mr. Barney is currently the managing director at Banyon Ventures, which is a private equity investment firm based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Mr. Barney retired from Energy Solutions, which at the time was a New York Stock Exchange company headquartered in Salt Lake City. That was in October of 2008 after nearly 16 years with Energy Solutions. He had many roles in his time at Energy Solutions, which included Chief Operating Officer, VP of Investor Relations, VP of Government Relations, and VP of Corporate Development. Mr. Barney graduated in 1992 from BYU, where he earned his bachelor degree in international relations. He furthered his studies with a master's degree from Utah State University in political economy, where he was a member of the Phi Kappa Phi? I don't know. It's an honor society, so we didn't have those down at BYU where I went. So Mr. Barney is active in maybe we did. I just didn't. I wasn't eligible, I guess. Mr. Barney is active in civic and community affairs and currently serves on several boards, both in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. Lives in Salt Lake City, Utah. He and his wife Paula are the parents of 4 boys. And on my left here is Jeff Steed. Jeff is also a partner at Kirton McConkie at the law firm that I'm at. Jeff is a member of our tax and international practice sections. His practice emphasizes a combination of tax, legal, and financial strategies for both domestic and foreign clients. Jeff advises on an exclusive private clientele in regard to their estates, private businesses, trusts, and charities. And his clientele includes public company executives, entrepreneurs, principals of global private equity and investment capital funds, as well as professional athletes, actors, entertainers, musicians, artists, authors, members of the medical and legal communities, and other prominent individuals and their families in all aspects. In serving these high-profile clients, Mr. Steed is also involved in sophisticated planning for private enterprise and charity, including all aspects of entity formation, capitalization, planning, structure, and governance. He serves as general counsel and sits on board of directors for large private, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations. Jeff also represents prominent financial institutions, investment companies, and trusts, public charities, and public charities having a global presence. He has served over the years in various capacities with Utah State Bar, including as past chairman of the section on nonprofit organizations. He's also actively involved in the development and planned giving offices for large universities, religious institutions, and other global nonprofits. Jeff is also a frequent speaker on various topics involving the areas of estate planning, cross-border finance, private enterprise, trust and asset protection, nonprofit, foreign investment, and multi-jurisdictional practice. He has published numerous articles on these subjects, and he's been recognized as one of Utah's legal elites for estate planning and nonprofit, and is also as a Mountain State super lawyer for estate planning and taxation. Also of note, Jeff is an adjunct professor of law at the University of Utah, and was also just selected for Utah Business Magazine's 40 Under 40. So with that, I would like to actually ask each one of our panelists to give us a quick description about the organizations that they serve and maybe some of the more recent challenges that they've each faced as these organizations have grown and have developed and how they've reacted to a couple of these things. So if you want to take 2 minutes to give us a quick rundown on who you work for and any challenges that you're facing. Yeah, please, Jeff. Thanks.
Be happy to. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here today. Love Utah State. Love Cache Valley. So I work now for Banyon Ventures. It's a small private equity firm based in Salt Lake City, Utah. And what we do is we look to invest between $2 and $10 million in each deal. So we are on the smaller side. We look for companies that are in the startup phase, but not true startups. So we look for companies that are maybe between 2 and 10 million in revenue, and then we like to provide the growth capital as well as maybe some management assistance to help them come to $25 to $50 million companies, at which point we help them either transition to a different capital partner or to an exit. And it's been great. We primarily focus in what we call meat and potatoes businesses. We have refrigeration service companies, logistics businesses, cement mix businesses, manufacturing businesses, and that's what we do. And so we're involved with companies in the growth phase, and that's what we specialize in. And so pretty familiar with a lot of the problems that those companies face. And as was said in the earlier panel, I think today in the labor market, at least along the Wasatch Front, the biggest challenge is skilled labor. That's the biggest challenges I think all of our portfolio companies face.
Great, thank you. That's right. That's great. Bob?
So I work for an organization, Research Now, SSI, and you can think of what we do as we are the intel inside of the insights and data industry. So we maintain communities of about 20 million people around the world who give us permission to collect their personal data. So that could be tracking their location, and maybe Applebee's wants to know why they drove past an Applebee's and ate at a Chili's. Could be through surveys or any number of other forms of collecting their data through tagging their computer or all sorts of things. We are a service business. And my role at the company for the past 3 years has been to transition us away from being a service business and to provide our data and insights to customers delivered programmatically or via software. I have been with the company for about 11 years, just about 11 years. Over that period of time, we've grown from 3 million in revenue to 650 million. And so there's been tremendous challenges along the way, and very much looking forward to being here. So thank you, and participating in the panel.
Great, thank you. Jeff?
Absolutely. I'm a shareholder at Kirton McConkie. Kirton McConkie is the largest law firm in Salt Lake City, or really in Utah, as far as the number of attorneys who are licensed to practice within this state. And we represent really the gamut of companies, everything from startups, small startups, to very established companies, public companies, ventures. We help take companies public. We help with exit strategies. We help with everything involving their intellectual property, with their corporate needs, with their asset protection, and really where my role has been primarily focused recently is helping companies navigate the waters of uncertainty regarding all the new financial and tax and regulations and their obligations with respect to things that are happening both domestically and cross-border. It's very, very dynamic. It's a very dynamic field. It's almost like where every month there's some new rule that affects pretty much everyone. And so one of the challenges that we're seeing is, quite frankly, is how do startup or emerging companies or established companies, how do they protect themselves in an environment where your obligations are a moving target? And at least that's what I see as being one of the challenges. But that's a little bit about our company. So,
Beth.
Thank you. So I work with a lot of early stage startup companies that are incubating at Salt Lake Community College in our business incubator, as well as idea people and companies that have had a little success and have entered into the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. And universally, I think a lot of these early companies don't understand how many resources are available to them. So we try to bridge that gap of, I really have a great idea and I want to start my own company. I just don't know where to begin. And even here in Utah State, the Small Business Development Center is that resource for you to go to and say, I have this great idea, but I don't know where to begin. And so we try to bridge that gap to get them financially sound, to get them kind of started in the right direction so that they can go to a Banyon in a few years and say, okay, now I'm ready to take on an equity partner, or I am ready to license my technology, my intellectual property with a legal firm like Kirton. And so really we see it more as an opportunity than a challenge of just providing that training and education, that gap of floundering that a lot of early stage companies do when they don't really necessarily need to, because resources like us exist. So we try to be that partner in getting you off the ground successfully.
Great, thank you. And just by way of introduction, I'm also, my name is David Evans. I'm a shareholder at Kirton McConkie. I'm one of Jeff's colleagues there. I'm in the corporate practice group, and I do a wide range of corporate transactions ranging from entity formation to exit and everything in between, including private equity and equity funding transactions. That's kind of where I spend the bulk of my time. So we see a lot of these issues that everyone has talked about, where companies need to expand or they have a need for an infusion of capital, and that's usually where I come into play and help them draft those documents and stay within the realms of the law there, which can be tricky sometimes, to say the least. So I in preparing for this, I was kind of laughing when I got the panel list, because on my right, Bob is my next door neighbor. On my left, Jeff is my next door neighbor for more time than I'm next door neighbors to Bob. Beth I met at dinner last night, and so I was licking my chops thinking, okay, I know these guys already. I'm going to ask Tim all these questions, and Tim walks in and says, "Hey, is your dad Dave Evans in Salt Lake?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, I babysat all your little brothers and sisters when they came and picked you up from your mission over in Tokyo." So that we have way too much connections to really make him the scapegoat here. So it is truly indeed a small world here in Utah. So good times though, right? So. We do have a handful of questions, and then at the end of the panel, assuming we have some time, I'd like to open it up for some questions and answers. Maybe when we have 5-6 minutes to go, we'll open it up. But I'd like to start off by asking Beth a question. One thing that we see a lot of, I think it's safe to say that we've all seen a lot of, is that as organizations grow and develop, they face challenges, and those challenges are going to come in many different forms and in many different ways at you. Have you come across in all of your experience with all these small startup kind of incubators level companies, have you seen anything that stands out at you as something that someone can do to develop a kind of an ability to anticipate some of those challenges?
So I'll take a different tact from probably the rest of the panel. Having started my own business, I was in the trenches myself, and I look at challenges more, and maybe it's just my eternal optimism, as opportunities. There's no question that anyone who's looking to start their own venture is going to face challenges. That's just sort of a given. Just like the gentleman this morning who said, plan on a 10 to 16 hour work day every day for a very long time. So when I decided to go into business for myself, I really looked at it as, what is my opportunity? The challenges are a given. But I looked at it as, what is the market potential and what's the need that I can fill? And so when we talk to early stage companies, that's what we really try to get their mindset to shift a little bit. And I would say that those that are going to be the most successful in that kind of take that approach. And do they have the passion? Do they have the tenacity? Do they care enough to really work at it as hard as it's going to take to get where they need to be? And are they willing to put forth their own investment? We talk a lot about access to capital, and I would say that everyone up here would probably agree that if you're not willing to stakehold your own investment, no bank, no investor, no angel, no VC is really going to take you very seriously. So I think really looking yourself in the mirror in venturing down this path of entrepreneurship and asking those questions first are going to help you find money and help you find partners just by being open to the opportunities that are going to come your way, not the challenges.
That's a great point. I often joke with my clients and I say joke very loosely, but when someone says, hey, I need to raise $1 million and I need to do that, to cover my operations for the next 6 months, I often joke that, hey, if you think it's going to take, 3 weeks to raise that $1 million and you only need $1 million for 6 months, you're going to need $2 million and it's going to take you 6 weeks to get that. It's going to take twice as long and cost twice as much. And so there are, and honestly, I think if I went back and did a case study, it's probably not bad advice, to be honest with you. So, Jeff, as you've advised your clients on various challenges that they face, what have you seen that clients have done, or other business entrepreneurs have done, business entrepreneurs that they've done to mitigate challenges that come up, and what have they done to almost be preemptive in expecting those challenges?
Well, and the challenge is a part of life. Challenge is extremely a part of life with respect to new ventures, startups, entrepreneurs. In fact, I think that your group, not necessarily my group, but your group, seeks that, and you love it, right? You just thrive off that. I love this challenge. At least that's with my entrepreneurial clients. That's what I've seen. Nonetheless, challenge doesn't. There's a dark side there as well, and I've seen both sides. In fact, as the lawyer, I think I've seen the dark side far more times than I would like to. I spent far too long within the weeds of that dark side. What can you do to really mitigate? Let me state this. I mean, obviously, there's lawyers. There are rules. There are regulations that you need to make yourself aware of, and protect yourself. Going into these relationships, because that's what they are. They're human relationships, and like all human relationships, no human relationship is ever going to turn out exactly like you think it's going to. That's just. Entrepreneuring is a social study. It's a social experiment, just like a marriage. I mean, dare I say this? And every successful organization, first of all, has to have a mission, and it has to have certain protections that are put in place in case something doesn't go right. But that's a given. Let me say this, though. What I've seen the successful entrepreneurs that I've dealt with, who maybe went through a major controversy or a major debilitating challenge, and then were able to turn around and go the other way and make a wild success out of it. What they really had more than anything, I would say, is that ability to seek mentors, what I call seek mentors, advisors. And I'm not just talking about legal counsel, okay? I'm not just talking about CPA or tax counsel. I'm talking about these types of events. This is a social experiment. You're here to build relationships with people who are doing the same things that you're doing. Maybe people who have done it before, right? Build those relationships. Be human. Dive down and develop those relationships so that it's a meaningful relationship, so that when challenge comes and controversy comes, which it will, you have an entire resource of opportunity there to go and cash in on. And when I say mentors, I don't just mean people that are older than you or wiser than you or that have done it before. People that are doing the same thing you're doing now. People that are underneath you. In my profession, I always ask, and I've got a few of them in the room, I always ask my associates, well, what do you think? My legal assistant's in this room. I ask her quite constantly, well, what do you think? George Washington, they said the hallmark of his great leadership skill, if you're a student of history, and I am, was the ability to really take stock in what people who were junior to him, his junior generals, he valued their opinion. Do you value your customer's opinion? Do you value your employee's opinion? Do you value your secretary's opinion? These are the types of things that if you're going to go through challenge and controversy are going to get you through that. Having that team of advisors, not just legal counsel. That's obvious, but having a team of advisors. So,
great,
that's
thank
what
you.
I'd say.
So Tim and Bob, I'd like to kind of pivot a little bit and ask you guys something of a similar question. But in your experience, both on the company side and on the investor side, have you guys seen a mindset that kind of stands out to you? I mean, obviously Jeff just talked about, I think it's safe to say, be willing to accept criticism, be willing to accept suggestions and implement those when it even means, deviating from your set course. But have you guys seen anything else out there that you'd like to comment on that some type of a tactical mindset maybe that really helps you to overcome challenges, that helps you to meet them head on and get across the finish line there?
Thank you. All right. So there's a few things. I think number one, just try and avoid Pyrrhic victories. So I don't know if there's any fans of the movie The Big Lebowski in the crowd. Okay, good.
The laughing
a couple fans. All life lessons can be found in that movie. And there's a particular scene where one of the characters are sitting at the diner, Walter, and he's kind of causing a scene, and the dude says, you're right, Walter, but you're still an asshole. And so I think about that all the time within a professional context. So when is it appropriate to steamroll somebody? When is it appropriate to seek counsel? And I tend to think just very tactically, your job as an owner or a manager is to build a coalition, especially if you're seeking to hire intellectually curious, capable people who are smarter than you. It's how do you build a coalition around a strategy where you can trust people to make good decisions without you. And sometimes that means you need to be maybe a little bit more like Walter. A lot of times it means you need to be kind of setting goals and letting people find their way within the cultural boundaries of the business. But from a very tactical level, when I face a problem that feels intractable, I think, all right, what's the first step to building a coalition? Do I understand the problem? Who do I need to talk to understand it? Who do I need on my side? Because as you point out, there's no way to do it all on your own, no matter how high IQ or no matter how many hours a day you work.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob. I do like that movie. I would just say, from an investor standpoint, that what we've seen, the most successful entrepreneurs, those who can go from a good idea to a successful business, are those who know what they don't know. And what I mean by that is they don't, as has been said, they recognize they can't do it all. They recognize they don't know it all. And so they seek expertise from around them. The other thing that is challenging from taking a company from maybe a startup into the growth phase is you usually will have a team of entrepreneurs, is what we see more often than just one. And they all have kind of assumed roles because they all started the business. They in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases, they're not in the right roles. But they're stuck because they're friends that all started this business. And so how do you tell your best friend who's the VP of sales that he's terrible at sales, right? Or how do you tell the CEO who is a product development guy that he needs help on the finance side, right? And so that's why it's important to find good partners, good mentors, as has been mentioned, and to realize. In fact, one of the comments I loved at our keynote last night, we had a dinner last night. I don't know how many were there, but it was a great comment by the woman who spoke. Kretha, is that her name? Kretha Coleman. She said, talking about small businesses facing growth challenges, she said, "Is it more important to you to be the king or to be successful?" And I really love that, because I think sometimes if the most important thing to you is to be the king, then you're going to have a hard time being successful. And so those who can learn to recognize that that they need maybe someone from outside to help them figure those things out and to have those tough conversations. I'll just give you a quick example. We have a portfolio business started by two guys, and they set up a sales compensation plan when they first started. One of the guys is sales, the other guy is the product development guy. Well, as the company's grown, it's now about a $30–40 million company. We came in and we looked, hey, the sales guy is making, you know, several $1 million a year. It's not sustainable for a business this size. And we told that to the CEO, and he says, yeah, but he's my best friend. I can't tell him, you know, I can't cut his pay. And I said, well, let us do that. And even the guy whose pay we cut, who's now more in the market range, he has equity in the business. And so he's able to see how in the long term he's going to make a lot more money than he would have. So that's just a kind of real life example of what I mean when I say you got to put the right people in the right spots.
And I'd just like to add on with an example of the opposite. I was advising a client 4 or 5 years ago who is no longer in business. And it was structured as kind of a lot of entrepreneurial companies are, where you had one guy kind of had the bulk of the power of the company, the bulk of the voting control over the company. He had, I think, 68% of the vote. And they had run out of cash. And we were sitting around a conference room table one day, kind of going over their finances together. And we had invited a potential investor who had previously invested into the company to come and sit down with us and review the financials. And the investor was saying, hey, look, I will infuse some more money into this company. I believe in it. I think there's some legs under it. But I'm not going to invest if I don't have control anymore. And you know, they had used up all their resources, and so the investor was a little understandably mildly upset, you know, that they hadn't gotten the results that he thought that they were going to get. And the main guy, kind of going back to your comment there, Tim, he just adamantly refused to give up control. He literally, being king to him was more important than having a sustainable, viable company. And literally, that was the last meeting of that company. The company ended up, that meeting ended about a half hour after that argument came down. And 3 of the 4 partners did not step foot back in that building after that, because they realized it was just a futile effort at that point. And this guy was left to be king to himself, and that was all there was to it. So I think it's safe to say, and Beth, I want to get your take on this as well, but I think it's safe to say that you have to, you know, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a business owner, if you're going to be, engaged in these types of transactions, you have to be willing to listen to critique. You have to be willing to pivot. You have to be willing to cede control sometimes. You may not be the right person to own a voting control of a company, and if you're too proud, if you just know in your heart that's not who you are, good luck. So it's going to be hard to get investors to invest on that. But Beth, with your experience with, you know, you're much more at the seed level, at the very beginning stages with some of your experience at Solid Community. But looking back now, I mean, you've probably seen, I don't know how many thousands, hundreds of startup ideas and startups and whatnot. Some have probably made it, and probably the vast majority have not. But has there been anything that stands out to you that really separates the owners, not necessarily the business ideas or the concepts, but the owners that are successful versus the owners that fail?
Well, of course, we all wish there was a magic formula as to, if I do these things, will I be successful? And of course there isn't. We see companies, we've now put 450 companies through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses training, and some of them have been in business for a couple of years, some have been in business for 50 years. And then, of course, all of the startups that come through the incubator. And I think one of the key components that we always ask in our interviews for Goldman Sachs is, are you teachable? And I think that does go back to, you know, the companies that are unwilling to see their weaknesses in terms of, am I the leader of this company? We have a lot of physicians and clinical psychologists and clinicians who come into our programs. They're really, really good at counseling or dermatology or physical therapy, but they recognize that they suck at business. They don't know how to manage their business. They're not a people person, or they're an engineer, or they're an architect. And again, they're really, really good at that particular talent. But the ones that succeed are the ones who are willing to listen and to be coached and to reach out to mentors and not be king for a day, and recognize that's their shortcoming. It's always really fun to go through. We do a cultural exercise and a leadership exercise in our program, and have them kind of have that aha moment of, am I an analytical? Am I a driver? Am I a people person? And they get to kind of analyze and call themselves out for who they are and what their strengths are. And they, in turn, figure out what their weaknesses are. And those that are willing to accept that and recognize it, that, yeah, I'm in the CEO role, but I'm really not that guy. I should be in our operations. I should be in our processes. Those, to me, are the companies that I see the most potential, and the ones that are probably more likely to make it.
Great. Jeff, you're on the opposite end. So Jeff, just to give a little bit more background on Jeff, and I know I read his very, very long biography that he provided us, but I get to give Jeff garbage because I have to put up with him all day long every day. So one of Jeff's fortes is, and his expertise is, he advises high net worth individuals as far as estate planning and asset protection goes. So a lot of these people have inherited money, but a lot of these people are very successful, whether they're business owners or at one time entrepreneurs who made a killing, and now they need a guy like Jeff to say, all right, protect my assets, help me from a tax perspective if I passed away. How do I get most of my estate to my kids and my heirs and whatnot? So Jeff, from that perspective, as an advisor to, not 100%, successful people, but primarily successful people, what's your take on that from a mindset, tactical mindset perspective? Is there anything that stands out as far as the people that are kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum that Beth was kind of coming from at that point?
You mean as far as asset protection is concerned?
Well, no, as far as what the business owners' mindsets are, your clients' mindsets that have been successful.
My clients' mindsets who have been successful and have done this before and have, they've made their money, they've made their success is from their perspective, whenever it's all about the legacy, right? And when I say the legacy, what gets you up and going in the morning? And this is something that I tell my kids. You want to be successful? Okay, so we talked about how you want to be successful, but you don't want to be the king, right, necessarily. So how do you be successful? You be successful because you're not focused. What does it mean to you to be successful? And that's a question you've got to ask yourself. What is my vision? And yes, there's a financial component to that. But generally, if you start breaking down what your assets are, right? And this is what I do with my very high net worth clients. What are your assets? You got financial assets. In fact, you have a lot of financial assets. But the financial asset component here is probably the least important asset that you have. You have educational assets. You have social assets. You have community assets. You have charitable assets. These are the things that created the wealth in the first place. Having that vision to change the world is what, and getting up in the morning and having that passion, whatever that is, change the world in your little teeny tiny sphere. That's what created the wealth to begin with. When I'm meeting with new startups and they want to be successful, well then define successful. Because, I just met with a gentleman yesterday who's a new client. And I probably shouldn't say who it is, but he's here in the Valley. And he's built a successful business. He's built a wildly successful business here in the Valley. Young guy, startup, build a wildly successful business. And if you get into his mind, how did you create that? It all went back to, well, I had a vision. And it had nothing to do with the financial assets. I was always aware of what the financial assets were in the back of my mind because I had to. He's actually an accounting major from Utah State, as I understand it. And so has that analytical financial mind. But that's not what created his wealth, and he would readily admit it. What created his wealth was that ability to create a vision of, this is what I want to do, and he's got a foundation that basically the business funnels most of what it makes into the foundation. The foundation turns around and benefits the community. And in talking to him yesterday, he's like, why would I exit? I love this. You know what I'm saying? So, and then also being able to compartmentalize, this goes back to balance in all things in life. But you are not your business. You are, but you're not. Make certain that you're protecting yourself and your family. Many of you in this room have families, you have children, you have spouses. Make certain that you're doing what you need to do to help compartmentalize and protect that, just in case it goes wrong. So.
Great, thank you. Bob, just moving on to a different topic. And I think we'll ask each panelist this same question, then we'll wrap it up and have a short Q&A. So get your questions ready. So, but as you look back on your time with Research Now, what do you feel is the greatest potential, or what's the greatest potential that exists for missing key insights to opportunities to grow effectively? Is there anything in your past you think we should have done X, Y, and Z, or what could you have done in that regard?
There's a lot of those things.
Sure.
Quite a few. I think just kind of footing into the comments that have been made, I like the comment around vision. I think early on, when it was really hard to get traction, and there's some element of luck involved, the vision is what gives you the ability to work so hard with enough naivete not to be distracted. And so I look back on that and say, those characteristics, not only characteristics that I had, but that we had as a business at the time, to allow us to go after huge contracts. Or, I remember the first time I signed a big account, I was in New York, and I was, 20-something years old and from Cache Valley, and at a very nice restaurant where I felt uncomfortable, wearing very cheap dress clothes. And we got this multi-million-dollar deal done. It was fantastic. And I felt like the king for a moment. And then as the waiter came back, I realized I'd left my wallet in their office, in my briefcase. And it was just this perfect example of overwhelming confidence and naivete all at the same time. And I think that vision is what helps us all kind of walk the line between knowing when we need to get advice and just going for it. And so I think, as I look at our business, I think our biggest missed opportunities have probably been around getting too comfortable as we've grown. Maybe being too arrogant about the market position we've earned, and being not responsive enough to a really rapidly changing market. I mean, over the past 5 years, our core customer set, the channel we monetize our data through, 80% of our revenue, has shrunk 5%, while their competitors are eating their lunch. And it's easy to get complacent with that. And so that would be the answer. The coda, by the way, I did get up, I pretended like I had to go to the bathroom. I chased the waiter down, I gave him my BlackBerry, and said, I promise I'll come back, just don't tell them that I forgot my wallet. And I did come back and pay, and he had asked them for a business card. He called them and told them what had happened, and that I did come back and pay, but otherwise they would have had to come back and pay. And we still work together, and it's kind of a joke now. So
those things tend to live on in infamy, huh? Yeah,
yes.
I've got a client who we went to. We were down at CES together, and same thing. They're cash only in the cafeteria there, and I didn't have any cash. And I'm like, hey, I'll buy you lunch today, no problem at all. And, he ended up paying $50 for a corned beef sandwich or something like that. So I still get garbage from him about that. That was a long time ago too. Tim, any thoughts on whether it's Energy Solutions or Banyon or any of your portfolios?
I can't tell you how many times people that I've been at lunch with have forgotten their wallet.
As we go to lunch, I'll make sure I forget mine.
Several are sitting here. But anyway, I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty broad question.
It is, yeah.
But I just think that when you see this is what I kind of comes back to what I said earlier. That's why you need to surround yourself with good people, because when you see an opportunity, Most good business opportunities involve risk. You have to be willing to take risk, but that risk needs to be a calculated risk. And so being able to have people you trust and you can bounce the ideas off and think about the problem from every different angle before you make a decision, and then you jump in. And so I think that's the biggest mistake that I see growth companies make, is that they're one of two things. They're either too quick to take too big of risks, or they're too conservative to be willing to take a risk. And you have to find a balance. That it's not one or the other. It's kind of in between there. And so, yeah. I think
Well, and that's where kind of the mentors come into play, especially if this is your first rodeo too, right? Where you may not realize the degree of risk that you're possibly going to take on, and if you have a good mentor or a group of mentors, that can be easily calculated at that point.
Right.
So great, Jeff and Beth, we're running short on time. Do you mind if we punt on you guys and open this up for a couple questions from the audience for anyone?
So we talked about, I'm just going to pull my question here. We talked about looking for skilled labor, how there's a large lack of skilled labor, and how that's high in demand. And then I think you mentioned how Beth, being teachable is a really important skill. But what would you guys say for us that are going out into the workforce? What are some skills that are most sought after and will be in most demand in the next 5 to 20 years?
Need to start?
Go for it.
The first thing that comes to mind, because of that shortage and because we hear it all the time from the CEOs that are coming through our program with this frustration, is we need to find people who can critically think and who can be problem solvers and work in teams. And it's kind of becoming, I hope it's not becoming a trite catchphrase of becoming critical thinkers, but it really is so true, is that there's plenty of skills. They say that what college kids are learning today is going to be obsolete by the time they graduate. So teaching them specific skills in terms of technical skills, those are going to evolve and change, and the company is going to hopefully bring you along with their technology. But can you adapt and change and critically add to an innovative culture? And every company, especially startups and early stage companies, have to be innovative. And if you're not bringing that to the table and all you can do is the tactical piece, you're not going to be that marketable, in my opinion.
For me, the number one thing is intellectual curiosity. I want somebody who is going to be interested in learning about the business, the competition, the challenges a company faces. And number two is quantitative ability. Anecdotes are a dime a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I guess I've sat up here and given anecdotes. But I need somebody, and I need people on the team who can look at data and be objective and let that data guide them. And so for me, those are the two things. And frankly, it doesn't matter if that's statistics or economics or computer science, or I've hired fabulous people who came out of the philosophy department here at Utah State who learned logic. Just someone who can be objective and look at data in a meaningful way and is intellectually curious.
I would add, can I add too, just being cultural. I agree with everything you said. I agree with everything you said, but I would also add cultural sensitivity and interpersonal skills. You can be the best critical thinker in the world. You can be exceptionally intellectually curious. But going back to what I said earlier, entrepreneuring is a social experiment. It's what it is. It's a human interaction. And this is a challenge we're facing. Everybody talks about technology. Technology's great. Technology's great. Technology in itself is a challenge, because are you getting out there and are you networking? Are you meeting with people? Are you going to events like this? Are you building meaningful relationships that are going to help you through, those, well, from my perspective, from controversy or for a challenging time, But more than that, are you culturally sensitive? We are different, and do we celebrate those differences? Do you celebrate the differences in your coworkers, in your clients, in your peers, in your vendors? Because especially as we become more and more global and things go, cross borders, the most successful businesses that I see are people who love people. They love the diversity of the human family. And when I look at my clientele, especially my very high net worth clientele, my billionaire clients, my the guys that have been through where you guys are and have exited, and then they've maybe done it multiple times. What makes them so successful? I would pinpoint intellectual curiosity, yes. I would pinpoint critical thinking skills, absolutely. I would put above those, they are culturally sensitive and they have extremely amazing interpersonal skills.
Okay. We're out of time. I'd like to thank the panelists for taking the time, an hour today to sit up here and get peppered with questions. And thank you all for coming to this panel presentation today.